So, just what is a great handheld without some great LEGO games? The LEGO games are really a pleasure of mine. On the PSP, LEGO Star Wars 2 on the Vita, all of them. Marvel, Avengers, Batman 2 and 3, Lord of the Rings, Hobbit movie, Star Wars The Force Awakens, the list goes on. I'm really fanatical when it comes to LEGO games. I get drawn in, I get addicted, and I absolutely love playing and reviewing them. So now that the first LEGO game for the Nintendo Switch has released, we're going to dive into it. Originally a Wii U game ported to consoles with local multiplayer added, here is my review of LEGO City Undercover. Have you ever been in a store like Toys R Us or Walmart and seen those LEGO City themed playsets? Basically, LEGO and TT Fusion took those sets and turned them into a world, and that world is where LEGO City Undercover takes place. The story is you are Chase McCain, a policeman who is forcibly transferred out of LEGO City Police Department after bringing down a huge criminal and accidentally revealing a witness's identification on live TV. But when said criminal escapes from prison, the mayor brings him back in order to track down that criminal and put him back behind bars. Now, the story of Undercover sounds very serious like what I just said, but it's also a giant reference to action and sci-fi movies, or just movies and video games in general. As you go through the story, there's always going to be huge, giant references to movies and games. Now, off the top of my head, I can think of references to Aliens, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Metal Gear Solid, The Shawshank Redemption, and pretty much every Arnold Schwarzenegger movie of all time. Now, these two factors do come in kind of nice, because you've got the serious tone of the actual story, plus you've got all of this tongue-in-cheek humor and all these references, and it really balances well. LEGO City Undercover is an action-adventure game, but it's also a Grand Theft Auto-inspired open-world sandbox game. Now, if you've played console LEGO games or the PS Vita version of LEGO Marvel's Avengers, you'll know that a lot of times LEGO games are around a sizable sandbox that you can explore, plus all of your enclosed missions that you do for the story. LEGO City Undercover is like this, but on a much grander scale. I would say that LEGO City in this game is pretty much as big as Vice City was in Vice City and Vice City Stories. Might be a little bit bigger. But basically the thing is, you have this giant open world that you're constantly going through, and some of the story missions even take place in this huge open world. It really just gives off a Grand Theft Auto vibe. Now, it does this not only with the missions, but you can also steal any car that's driving down the road simply by walking up to it and jumping in it. And it's not just cars. I mean, there's cars, trucks, buses, motorcycles, boats, helicopters, trains, animals like pigs and horses, and even special disability vehicles like wheelchairs that you can go and grab. And to go off of this, yes, I pulled up a wheelchair, and you can go and destroy other cars in a wheelchair, which really turns out hilarious. Now, as you're progressing through the game, what you do is your own choice. You can go do story missions, or you can explore the open world. The thing is, at the start of the game, only half of the open world is available to you. And there are all these secret areas that require specific powers that you gain through story mode to be able to collect everything. So it's kind of a balance between going to the story for a little while to unlock the second half of the world and to start gaining story powers, then go back to exploring and finding all of these secret areas that require story powers to unlock. And that balance actually works out really well, because when you're doing the story mode, every once in a while there's going to be these giant hurdles, like you need to go to a training dojo but the bridge is missing, so you have to make a bridge. And that is where exploration comes into play, because LEGO City Undercover has two different sets of currency. It has studs that you collect like regular LEGO games that are used to buy characters, vehicles, gold bricks for completion, but there's also bricks. These drop either from destroying objects or by collecting hidden special super bricks that are littered around the open world. So the progression will basically go, you go do a story mission, then you need 20,000 bricks to make this bridge. So you have to actually explore a little, find some of these super bricks, and then once you have enough, you go back and do the story mission again. And it kind of just takes you a balance back and forth, so you can't power play the story, but you're also introduced to a lot of the open world elements that you can expand upon once you get to post-game. Because a lot of those secret areas are not accessible until post-game. Now the only part of the game where you're taken out of the open world is through some story missions. And in these missions, you're taken into large enclosed areas instead of the open world. But you still have to go through the open world to find it, so it's kind of still integrated in a way. And once you get into these story missions, you're given the familiar gameplay that you know from the console games, where you're just doing story objectives, solving puzzles, and fighting enemies as the story kind of unfolds, until the level's over and you're popped right back into the open world. Now this whole back and forth flow goes on until the story ends, which should take you about 17 to 20 hours to do. I did a fair amount of exploration every so often, and I cleared the story slightly over 17 hours, according to the in-game clock. And once you get the story done, post-game opens up. There are tons of areas, as I mentioned earlier, that don't become available until you hit post-game and you get that final power. And that's when the game really starts to open up. Because when I cleared the story, I was around 24% completion, and didn't get to 30% until I had played for an extra 2 or 3 hours. Basically, there's a lot to do. As far as controls are concerned, I have no problem with the way the controls are set up, but I do want to clarify one thing. LEGO City Undercover uses every single button on the Nintendo Switch interface. So the fact that they didn't opt for single Joy-Con play versus multiple controller co-op play is pretty well justified, because when you've got something that uses every button, both analog sticks, all 4 face buttons, the plus and minus button, all 4 D-pad buttons, and all 4 triggers, how are you going to emulate that on just one Joy-Con? You can't. Now let's get to presentation, where a lot of my nitpicks are going to be. Now visually, the game looks pretty nice. There are barely any jagged edges, even in handheld mode. Nothing really noticeable. The first thing I didn't like about the game is the fact that there's no music when you're exploring the open world. When you're in story missions, or you're in gang attacks, or you're in a side quest, there's great music all the time. But when you're just exploring the open world for the sake of exploring, sound effects, and that's it. That's one thing I was really disappointed in. Now, load times. Loading the sandbox can vary, but I'd say the average loading time is between 25 seconds and a full minute. Most of those were around the 30-second range, but that's still a pretty long time to wait, especially if you're just staring at the screen in handheld mode. Next, let's get the frame rate. LEGO City Undercover runs at a native frame rate of 30 frames per second, but when you're exploring the open world, it will drop fairly often to around 25, which 25 isn't a huge drop. It's nowhere near unplayable, but it's still pretty constant. It's not stable. It's not going to ruin your gameplay experience, but it's not as stable as it should be. And the final issue that I have with the presentation, crashing. LEGO City Undercover crashes from time to time. Note that I've played the game for almost 20 hours now, and it's only crashed on me 4 times. 3 times were within the first 3 hours of the game, and it didn't crash again until about 15 or 16 hours later. It's not really predictable, it's not based on a specific event, but it just crashes every once in a while. So just be prepared for that. It's not huge, it doesn't happen like every 5 minutes or anything, but it happens. Next, let's talk about battery life. This is a 3D game, so my initial expectations are 2 to 3 hours of gameplay like Zelda, and like Snake Pass. So I was mildly happy with the results I got. From 100% to 0% battery, here are the battery times you're going to get from LEGO City Undercover. With max brightness and the Wi-Fi turned on, you're going to get 2 hours and 46 minutes. With max brightness and the Wi-Fi off, you're going to get 3 hours and 3 minutes. Low brightness with the Wi-Fi on, 4 hours and 9 minutes. And low brightness with the Wi-Fi off, you're going to get 4 hours and 26 minutes. So considering that everything in the game is pretty bright, so you can keep it on low brightness even when you're out on a sunny day, you're going to be able to pump out almost 4.5 hours out of this game, which that's pretty decent for a 3D game, especially since the last 3D open world game we had, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, didn't even get close to 4 hours. Now, in conclusion, LEGO City Undercover is a great GTA for the family game. It's crammed with content, it'll take dozens upon dozens of hours to complete, and if you're in a family home with multiple sets of Joy-Cons, it's great for co-op play. Now, the Switch version is pretty glitchy, and there are going to be a lot of points dropped for it, from the loading times, the frame drops, the crashing, and really the lack of overworld music. But if you're a handheld LEGO fan, there's really no reason not to jump on this because it is great. Reviews to Go rates LEGO City Undercover a 6 out of 10. If you'd like to comment on this further, feel free to below or head to my website at www.reviewstogo.com.